Thank you so much. Why do we explore? Hello and good morning. My name is Dr. Shawna Pandya, and as you've heard, I'm a physician, Scientist-Astronaut Candidate, aquanaut candidate, analog astronaut, and I think that qualifies me to have been around the block when it comes to exploration. And today I'd like to use these experiences to share a few of my insights when it comes to exploration. But first, I'd like to start with 3 questions. First of all, what does it mean to explore? Secondly, why does it matter? And thirdly, how do we enable exploration going forwards? But before we talk about any of that, I want to talk about the world today in 2019. This is an amazing time to be alive. If you are 50 years old, you are part of a generation that has only ever known the human race to be a multi-world faring species. And I refer, of course, to those historic first steps of Aldrin and Armstrong on July 20th, 1969. If you are 25 years old, you have never known a world without exoplanets. And when I was growing up, the question of whether there were planets outside our solar system was highly contested. And since the advent of the 1990s and the Kepler Space Telescope, we have since learned that we have over 5,000 candidate planets, over 2,500 of which have been confirmed to be exoplanet candidates. If you're 19 years old, you take it for granted that we just happen to have a continuously crewed off-world space station that has been manned for over 6,000 plus days to date and visited by men and women of over 18 countries. This is the state of unmanned exploration in the solar system to date. Not bad for a race that started off in a political show of one-upmanship in the 1950s, that expanded to what we call the Big Five space agencies at the turn of the 21st century, and that today has turned into a landscape of spacefaring nations with space agencies that looks like this. And so how did this evolution proceed, and why does it matter? Today we know that space exploration is useful for more than political one-upmanship. We use space exploration and satellites for telecommunications, remote sensing, and Earth observation. And through this we've learned that access to space is a driver for development, for data, for infrastructure, and for economy. And at the same time we've learned that through exploration, this is a form of technological advancement, which in and of itself increases access and is a form of empowerment. And when we talk about exploration as a driver for empowerment, it's not just for nations and it's not just for organizations, but it relates to individuals as well. So you heard in my introduction that I'm a Scientist-Astronaut Candidate, and I've been involved with Project PoSSUM since 2015. And for those of you in the space industry, you know that we love our acronyms, and PoSSUM is no different. It stands for Polar Suborbital Science of the Upper Mesosphere. And with this project, since 2015, I've been lucky enough to test spacesuits in 0G. We've tested these same intravehicular activity spacesuits in off-nominal spacecraft crash landing scenarios. And I've also been a citizen scientist in high-altitude noctilucent cloud campaigns testing 3D tomography instruments. So testing the 3D structure of clouds thought to be related to climate change. So coming back to this laundry list of what people of different ages know in the world in 2019, my hope going forward is that children growing up in this climate will not know multiple paths towards astronautics, through governmental space agencies, through commercial spaceflight, and through citizen science astronautics. But we talked about empowerment for increasing accessibility. But empowerment is also a way to unlock potential, because when we empower people, we give them a platform. When we give them platform, we give them license to create, to perform, and to build. And I'm no different. I came into this program as a citizen scientist, but I've since been enlisted to use my own medical expertise, and today I'm the head instructor of our operational space medicine course, where I get to use my medical expertise on tough problems related to operational space medicine and to surface operations in EVA, and get to challenge my students to think about design solutions to these equally tough problems. So when I was growing up, I remember my mom coming to me once when I was 10, And she told me about a media report that said by the year 2000, we as a human species would have discovered everything there is to know. I won't date myself by telling you what year that was in. But what we've learned since, that perhaps when we started off with these naive ambitions, maybe the reason we started off discovering was to try to uncover everything there is to know in the universe. But today, our perception of discovery is a little bit different. And it's turned out that discovery is like a Zenos Paradox. Just as when we drop mercury on the floor and droplets turn into infinitesimally smaller droplets, discovery is no different. Different discoveries breed new discoveries and spur new pathways and spur new questions. And so for me, my Zenos Paradox may have started off with space, but has led to that other great frontier of exploration, and that is, of course, our oceans. My favorite facts about ocean exploration are that we have to date sent 12 men to the moon, but only 4 to the depths of the ocean's deepest point at the Marianas Trench, almost 11 kilometers below the ocean surface. We have more imaging these days on the surface of the moon than we do of the ocean, and to date we've only mapped 5% of our oceans. And so my journey into exploration and my Zenos Paradox led me into the realm of ocean exploration. And last month, through a dive medical course, I was lucky enough to spend an overnight stay at the world's only underwater research facility at the Aquarius Reef Base. Furthering my path down this journey, later this year I'll be embarking upon my first underwater mission at the Jules Undersea Lodge on a 5-day research mission. So we've talked about the why of exploration, and we've covered enabling, and we've covered pathways and platforms, and we've covered empowerment. But perhaps I haven't touched on what are probably the 2 most obvious reasons of the why of discovery. When I was at the Mars Desert Research Station, myself and my crewmate, we would go on EVAs or extravehicular activities, and we would always find the most challenging, steepest slope to climb. And when we reached the summit, we would take a moment to look to where we'd come from and appreciate the work that had been put in. But then we would look at the scenery and the landscape that lay before us, and we would look at the pathways that lay for us to discover, to walk down, and to uncover anew. And I think it's the perfect metaphor for human exploration, because why do we push those limits? It's to ask, where do we go to next? The final why of exploration is probably the most obvious. We talked about how we live in an incredible world of discovery and technological advancement. We will also live in perhaps what is one of the most perilous times in human existence. We've heard that old joke floating around that says asteroids are Mother Nature's way of saying, how's that space program coming along? But we also live with more imminent threats. In March of this year, the United Nations declared that without emergent intervention, by 2030, we would be possibly living with irreversible damage from climate change. And so we discover for self-protection as well. We also have to deal with the unintended consequences of discovery. Some of our greatest innovations and discoveries and advancements have also laid way for our greatest predicaments. Climate change is one of them. So the post-industrial revolution, carbon dioxide levels and emissions in our atmosphere today also contribute to one of our greatest threats to survival. Antibiotic resistance at times has competed with the rate of antibiotic development. And so if it sounds like we've evolved from talking about where we've been and what we've achieved as a human species to talking about problem solving and innovating, that is wholly intentional. Because you cannot discuss one without talking about the other. And curiosity breeds exploration, which in turn spurs discovery, which spurs progress. And this is the why of why we explore. We explore to empower, and we explore to give access. But that in turn breeds further exploration, which uncovers further pathways, divergent pathways, unintended pathways. And most importantly, exploration is a survival tool. We've talked today about what it means to explore and why it matters. And I'd like to spend some time now talking about how we enable exploration going forward. This is an incredible time to be alive. Today, in our hands, in the palm of our hands with a smartphone, we can hold more computing power than all of NASA had in 1969 when it sent men to the moon. Answers to burning questions we may have are never more than a few keystrokes and an internet search engine result away. We can teach ourselves with YouTube videos and massive online open courses and DIY courses. But we can also share our experience and broadcast it to the world. But when it comes to enabling exploration, it's a much even simpler process than that. Every single one of us can spur our vision for what advancement and exploration should look like going forward. And it starts with a simple question. And that's the same question that has driven us through every great discovery in history. It's the same question that drove Isaac Newton as he was crafting his theory of gravity from when he first watched an apple fall towards the center of the earth. It's the same question that drove Henry Becquerel as he correctly deduced the process of radioactive decay upon noticing his isolated uranium sample yielded exposed photographic films. And that question, quite simply, is this: what if? What if we dared to imagine that which is not yet to be? What if, for example, low Earth orbit was no longer the realm of astronauts and scientists and engineers and pilots, but what if it was accessible to everyone, to athletes and entrepreneurs and artists? How would that drive accessibility and in turn empower all the people? And how would that further enable exploration? So, what if is the first start? And we use that to craft our vision for architecting the future. And when we reverse engineer that vision to create a blueprint going forward and to find the connections to create the future that we want. My point is, the future that we want to see is ours to craft and architect. But it starts with adopting this exploration mindset. I started my talk today talking to you about what the generations in the year 2019 may have seen and may have experienced in the world they know. And I want to end by challenging you to imagine what the generations 50 years from now in 2069 and what kind of world and existence they will know. Perhaps in 2069 there will be 40-year-olds who take it for granted that point-to-point suborbital transportation is the fastest and most common way of transportation. Perhaps there will be 30-year-olds who have never known an existence that was threatened by climate change. Maybe there will be 25-year-olds who take it for granted that permanent Martian outposts are just a way of life. And my hope is, going forward, that for 20-year-olds, the words HIV, AIDS, and cancer will simply be historical terms found in textbooks. So enabling exploration going forward, it starts with a very simple step. It starts with us, it starts here, and it starts today. And it starts with the question, what if? Thank you very much.